Rhea Voss discovered an outreach program that connects to domestic violence victims. This is the connection between the three churches. Do the deaths of three pastors, one deacon, point to a killer who's looking for a victim that might be hiding in this program? I'm Billy Jackson. After 26 years of law enforcement, this is Jackson's Case Files, where experience meets fiction. Rhea Voss is in the office, an office that the department made just for her since she's so close to this case. Right now, she's standing next to her wall with her photographs of the crime scenes, the deceased pastors, timelines, and she has her notes in her hand. Lieutenant Sarah Williams walks into the office. She greets Rhea, but she doesn't disturb Rhea because Rhea is in deep thought. Until Rhea comes up for some breath to speak and have a conversation, Sarah just walks around the office and she looks on Rhea's desk. She spots a familiar case file. She breaks Rhea's concentration. Rhea, what are you doing with Ella White's case file on your desk? Rhea looks up and she says, this is the first time I've interacted with Boone since the last time we were on that case together. He's being a little shaky with me on answers to questions I'm asking him, so I'm reviewing the old case to tie in and fill in some holes. Sarah looks at the case and she says, you know what? And she slams her hand down on the case file. She says, why don't you let me take this case file because your plate is full. You got the pastors you're working on. You got this case you're working on. Tell me what you're looking for. I'll look through the case file and let you know what I find. Rhea sees her put her hands on the case file and she tells Sarah, you know, I've had a caseloads before and I've handled them pretty well. I'll take care of this with myself. Sarah senses the tension in Rhea's voice and decides to change the subject. She says, you know, we're getting ready to release Boone's residence. Wanted to look over it one more time. You mind coming with us as we make sure we've got all the evidence we need out of that house? Rhea says, fine. Just let me finish what I'm doing here. In about 30 minutes, I'll get right with you. Sarah says, okay, walks out of the office and walks down the hallway. Before she gets to her office door, she turns around to look to see if anybody's following her, especially Rhea. Then she takes out her cell phone, walks in the office, and she makes a phone call. After the voice on the other end speaks, she says, yeah, it's me. Rhea's got the Ella White case file. I don't know how she got it. I can't follow her every day, but today I'm actually going to the crime scene with her. Listen, you just hold up your end and do what you're supposed to do, and I'll take care of everything over here. I'll talk to you later. Now, right now, I know all of you are saying, I'm the writer. I could tell you who the person on the phone was, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to save it for another time. I think it'd be better if you know it then. Back to the case. Rhea's sitting in the office. She looks at the Ella White case files. Rhea went to a laptop, tapped a few keys on Ella White, and she found out she was a member of Pastor Purdy's church. She got on the phone and started texting. She texted Bubba the information on Ella White to see if she could find out if there were any members that knew of her, if she could find out any information on Ella White that could help her with this case. Just as she finished texting him, a voice startled her. It was Sarah. You ready? Rhea grabbed some things, her kit, and she said, let's go. Rhea, Sarah, and a few officers arrived at the scene of Boone's home. Still considered a crime scene, they were going to do a last walk around to make sure they got all evidence. Sarah was excited because she wanted to make sure that they got everything. But for Rhea, this was a little different. You see, Rhea has been over that house over and over again. Rhea has made sure that they've collected every piece of evidence that that house has. Today, this investigation is going to show Rhea if something is found, that evidence is going to be suspicious because she knows it wasn't there before they got there today. There were several officers that walked outside with Sarah, and then there were officers on the inside of the house that were going to be with Rhea. Of the officers in the house, there was one she wanted to talk to in particular, an Officer Eric Jones. Officer Jones was one of the officers that helped move the files from Reverend Purdy's church, supposedly to the evidence unit. She wanted to find out where exactly they took those files. So she walks in and she finds Officer Jones searching Boone's bedroom. She walks in. She says, Officer Jones? He says, yes, ma'am. She says, I'm private investigator Rhea Voss. I'm assisting the police department in finding out what's going on. Jones says, I know exactly who you are, and it's an honor to meet you. And she said, I'm going to get right to it. You are one of the officers that helped take files, boxes of files, out of Reverend Purdy's church over to the evidence receiving unit. Am I correct? Jones looked around. He said, yes, I am. She said, where did you exactly take those files? Jones looked around and then he said to Rhea, he said, I can't talk to you here about that. Rhea asked him, so where can you talk to me about this? So he thinks for a second and he says, do you like fish sandwiches? She said, yeah. He said, meet me at that place out north and I'll be glad to talk to you. And she said, fine. Just as she was wrapping up with Jones, she heard Sarah yelling again. I found something. So Rhea runs out and she sees Sarah stooping down in the grass in the backyard. Rhea walks up and she stoops down as well. And Sarah says, take a look at this. In the grass was a bullet. It was the same manufacturer and the same caliber as the casings found in Boone's home. Sarah says, how about that? I bet you that's the third bullet that was missing from the magazine. Collect it. It's going to have Boone's fingerprints on it because it was his bullet. But if there's another fingerprint on there, that's going to be somebody we need to look at. That's another lead. As Sarah walked over to give the evidence to the officers, Rhea got a text from Bubba. He was ready with some information. So she went out to meet him at the park down the street from Reverend Purdy's church. Rhea and Bubba hugged each other when they met. Bubba said, you were right. She was a member of this church. A lot of people knew her and they liked her. Rhea said, did she ever come to the church with anybody? Bubba said, nobody saw any boyfriend or anybody with her. They did say that every now and then she would come to church and she'd have some bruises on her arms. And eventually she had a few bruises on her face. But they never saw her with anybody. Rhea said, what did they say happened after that? They said that she got with Reverend Purdy and they were getting ready to help her, but then she came up missing. Rhea said, did they get her in the program? Bubba said the program didn't start until after she came up missing. The good Reverend Purdy didn't want anything to happen to anybody else in the church, so they did research and they found the program after Ella White's abduction. Rhea shook her head. So what are we looking at here, Bubba? Bubba said, I think it's pretty simple. Rhea said, how you figure? He said, I think our killer is looking for someone who's been hidden in this program. He went through those three preachers to find out where that victim was. And for all we know, he might have the victim. Rhea said, you got any clue about who the victim is? Bubba said, I'm not a rocket scientist, but Ella White didn't die. Have you seen her? Rhea said, no. After that case and what happened with me with Boone, that's when I resigned and left. I didn't know anything that happened after that. Bubba said, I think our killer is Robert Taylor. Rhea said, Robert Taylor is dead. Bubba said, did you see a body? Has anybody seen a body? And then Rhea started thinking back to the article she was reading and the notes that said that the family wanted his body cremated. A lot of things started running through her head. She talked to Bubba a little bit more, and then she looked at the time and said, I gotta go, Bubba. I gotta meet somebody. Rhea went to meet Officer Jones at the fish sandwich shack. Say that 3 times fast. When she got to the shack, they sat down and they ordered their meal. When the waitress left the table, they started talking. Rhea said, tell me what happened. Officer Jones said, I love my job. I love being a police officer. But I got to tell you, that night that we took those files out of the church never sat well with me. Rhea said, what happened? Said, well, the mission started, we were going to help take the files out, load them into vans, and take them to the police evidence storage unit. Rhea said, is that what Detective Boone told you to do? Officer Jones said, Detective Boone was there at the beginning, but he wasn't there for the whole thing. In fact, he put this other guy in charge. He was a regular officer, but he was plain clothes and he seemed like he had some rank. I've never seen him before. But when Boone left, he told us to load everything into the vans. There were 3 vans for each church. And then we followed this guy in charge, who was an officer, to a public storage facility. Now, when we got out, he had one of the storage rooms open and he said, take all the files and stack them in this storage unit. I had to ask him, is this what we're supposed to do? Policy says we're supposed to take evidence to the police evidence place. He looked at me, he said, this is above your pay grade. Do as you're told. You have no idea what this investigation is about. So I did. But I wrote in my report what I did and what I didn't like about it. I turned it into my supervisor at the end of my shift. Rhea said, sound like you did the right thing. Officer Jones said, I don't know. I didn't get into this job to make evidence disappear. Rhea said, it's not disappeared if it's still there. She said, do you know where you took it? And the officer looked around, took out a piece of paper, and gave it to Rhea. He says, every morning I ride by, check with the manager to see if anybody's taking that stuff out. As of this morning, those files are still there. Rhea said, you did good. She put the paper in her hand. Waitress brought the food over. Rhea asked her to wrap hers up to go because she didn't want to stay in that cafe any longer. She had a job to do. The sun has gone down over the city. Rhea is parked in her car right across the street from the entrance to the evidence storage unit. She's taking notes, trying to figure out how she's going to get inside the storage unit to get the files. As she's writing in her notes, in her peripheral vision, she sees movement. She looks up and she sees a man dressed in black. He has a baklava on his face where you can only see his eyes. And he's carrying a huge gas can. The man in black pulls out an access card. He swipes it. The gate slowly opens. He picks up the gas can, looks around, and he discreetly walks into the gate. Rhea loses sight of him as he goes to the storage unit that was written on her piece of paper. Can Rhea get to the files before this man in black destroys them? And who was that on the phone talking with Sarah? And is there someone covering up the fact that the killer, Robert Taylor, is still alive? Join us in the next episode when we find more answers to these questions and get closer to finding out who the killer is. This is Jackson's Case Files, where experience meets fiction.